This podcast includes content created using artificial intelligence tools. All information is for general purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or regulatory advice. Listeners should verify information independently and consult qualified professionals for personalized guidance. Welcome to the Luxembourg Fundcast. Before we continue, we'd like to mention that the Luxembourg Fundcast is created and produced by Bertrand Mériot, a practicing regulatory lawyer admitted to the Luxembourg and Paris bars. The mission of this podcast is to bring clear, free, and reliable information sourced from official references that are carefully curated and continually updated and refined through high-standard, evolving prompt engineering on Luxembourg's financial regulation and investment funds to professionals and anyone interested in the Luxembourg Financial Center. Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on a truly fascinating deep dive. We're looking into one of the most operationally critical and I think legally sensitive areas of corporate governance, that is the delegation of powers from the board of directors of the Luxembourg S.A, or S.A as we'll call it. Now, this isn't just theory. We're analyzing this through the lens of a specific, quite complex, real-world type scenario. And just so you know, our analysis is current and relevant as of August 21st, 2025. Now, you might think delegation sounds pretty straightforward. Just tell someone what to do, right? But for a major publicly listed Luxembourg S.A, like our case study, let's call them Global Satellites S.A, well, it's anything but simple. Imagine them, if you will, in the immediate aftermath of a truly transformative international merger. This isn't just about efficiency, it's really about navigating a minefield of legal duties, cultural expectations, and frankly, sheer scale. It all demands surgical precision in every single detail of governance.
Indeed. And the fundamental tension for any board is always how to maintain that ultimate control and fulfill its very stringent fiduciary duties, while, at the same time, empowering a large, newly integrated, and often geographically dispersed executive team to actually run the business effectively, maybe even agilely. This isn't just about operational efficiency, as you said. It's really about establishing robust governance. Why? To mitigate systemic risk across the entire, now much larger organization. Getting this wrong. Well, the consequences can be catastrophic, not just financially, but reputationally, too.
Exactly. And for our Global Satellites essay, this challenge is magnified by three specific crucial factors that make their situation particularly compelling. It really is a masterclass in navigating complexity. First, there's the post-merger integration. They've recently acquired a U.S.-based competitor, which has effectively doubled the company's size and operational complexity almost overnight. This isn't just about sticking two companies together, it's about forging a single, unified, and efficient decision-making structure from the top down, almost on the fly, you could say.
Precisely. The sheer scale and, frankly, the velocity of change post-merger means that a board simply cannot afford to get bogged down in day-to-day minutiae. It must delegate. But, and this is the key point, it must do so with a level of, let's call it, surgical precision that ensures absolute clarity and unwavering accountability across the entire newly formed entity. Without that clarity, you risk internal paralysis, conflicting directives, maybe even a corporate culture that just can't adapt quickly enough.
Okay, second factor, the international leadership. Their board and the new executive team are a vibrant blend of Luxembourgish, German, Dutch, U.S., and U.K. nationals. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because each of these individuals brings different cultural assumptions and critically different legal expectations about corporate governance, about executive authority. What one person considers standard operating procedure or maybe an implied power, another might see as a legal overreach or perhaps an informal departure from due process. It's like trying to play chess when everyone's learned slightly different rules.
You've hit on a critical point there. This kind of melting pot of legal and cultural backgrounds on a board creates, both an incredible opportunity for diverse perspectives and, simultaneously, a very real risk of fundamental misunderstandings if it's not meticulously managed. Different jurisdictions have distinct foundational philosophies on executive power versus board oversight. In some cultures, executives are given quite a wide berth. In others, like Luxembourg, every significant action often needs explicit authorization. Navigating that divergence, it's an art in itself.
And third, there's partial state ownership.
Wow.
The Luxembourg state isn't just another investor, they're a key shareholder, with a representative serving as the vice chairperson of the board. This immediately introduces a significant public interest dimension. It demands a much higher standard of transparency, of formality, and accountability in all governance matters, especially delegation. It's not merely about satisfying private shareholders anymore. There's a broader public trust at stake here, a sense that the company's actions might reflect on the state itself.
Absolutely. This convergence of factors, the rapid post-merger growth, the international cultural tapestry of its leadership, and that critical public interest component, makes Global Satellites S.A. an unparalleled lens. It's perfect for dissecting the legal framework under the Luxembourg law of 10 August 1915 on commercial companies, what we all commonly refer to as the 1915 law. So we'll explore the required documentation, the often nuanced negotiation dynamics involved, and of course the best practices for managing this complex web of delegated authority. It really is a masterclass in how these elements intersect in the real world.
So what does all this mean for you listening? Whether you're a chief legal officer, perhaps a company secretary, or maybe an experienced director navigating similar waters, we will dissect this masterclass in board delegation, moving beyond the abstract to provide concrete, actionable insights, things you can hopefully apply directly in your own professional context, maybe saving you a few headaches along the way. Let's dig in. So with that complex scenario for Global Satellites S.A. firmly in mind, let's peel back the layers. Let's start with the bedrock, the foundational legal framework. This underpins any delegation of power in the Luxembourg S.A. The entire practice, you see, is built upon a legal foundation that grants the board of directors excessive powers. But critically, it also holds it strictly accountable. It's a fascinating balance, really, between empowerment and strict responsibility.
Absolutely. The very first cornerstone we must understand, the real wellspring of the board's authority, is this principle of plenary powers. It's enshrined in Article 441-5 of the 1915 law. This article states quite unequivocally that the board has the power to accomplir tous les actes nécessaires ou utiles à la réalisation de l'objet social, which, for our non-French-speaking listeners, essentially translates to accomplish all acts necessary or useful for the realization of the corporate object.
Okay. Necessary or useful for the corporate object. And this is the key exception, right, of powers reserved to the general meeting of shareholders by law or by the company's own articles of association.
Exactly.
That sounds incredibly broad, but surely even with such plenary powers, there must be practical limitations or maybe historical pitfalls that boards have fallen into when interpreting this. It sounds almost all-encompassing.
It is precisely that it's a plenary and residual power. This article establishes the board as the default, the primary management authority. Its power isn't just a list of things it can do. Instead, it means the board can do everything that isn't explicitly forbidden or reserved somewhere else, like in the articles or for the shareholders. This broad mandate is, indeed, the fundamental source from which the board's authority to delegate flows. But you're right to point out the tension. Many boards perhaps fall into the trap of assuming that these broad powers mean they have broad flexibility in how they then delegate those powers. That's where issues can arise.
Right, and this very breadth, this extensive sweep of power could potentially create ambiguity, couldn't it? Which raises an important question. Why is it so essential for the board to proactively and precisely define the limits of any delegated powers rather than just letting them be vaguely inferred, especially when the default is so broad? It seems almost counterintuitive.
It's crucial because while the board does have broad default powers, the moment it delegates those powers, the legal and operational expectation shifts dramatically without crystal clear limits. Well, a few things can happen. Delegates might inadvertently overstep their authority, leading to invalid actions, or the board itself might struggle to assert control when needed, leading to internal disputes, operational inefficiencies, or even, severe regulatory noncompliance. But here's the often overlooked insight. Precision in delegation, counterintuitively, often empowers rather than restricts.
Empowers? How so?
Well, when boundaries are crystal clear, executives actually feel more confident pushing the envelope within those defined parameters. They know the board has explicitly sanctioned their actions up to that point. It transforms ambiguity from a potential liability into perhaps a strategic advantage. It frees up the board for higher-level governance and strategy, and the executive team for more agile execution. For a company like Global Satellites with so many moving parts post-merger, a vague mandate isn't flexibility. It's frankly a recipe for internal paralysis. It's about trust, certainly, but trust backed by absolute clarity.
That puts a completely different spin on it. So clarity isn't just a legal box-ticking exercise. It's actually a strategic enabler.
Okay. Now, beyond that overarching plenary power, the 1915 law also provides specific statutory gateways for delegation. It's like a finely tuned toolkit for corporate architects.
Right.
And you're saying this isn't just a matter of convenience. The choice of which tool to use is a strategic governance decision in itself. Indeed, the law offers distinct mechanisms, each with specific implications. First, we have Article 441-10. This authorizes the delegation of gestion journalière, or daily management. This is typically the primary tool for empowering a chief executive officer, the CEO, and their executive team. It allows them to handle the routine, ongoing operations of the company. However, as we'll discuss, its scope requires very careful definition because daily for a global giant is vastly different from, say, a small local business.
Right. So it's for the everyday stuff, but what everyday means can be very different depending on the company's size, scale, maybe even its industry. What are the nuances there?
Exactly. Then we have Article 441-6. This permits the creation of board committees to which specific duties can be assigned. This enables the board to delegate preparatory work, analysis, and oversight to specialized groups. Think of vital committees like audit and risk, nomination, or remuneration committees. They dive deep into specific areas, conduct thorough analyses, and then bring well-considered recommendations back to the full board for the final decision. They are, in effect, the board's highly specialized eyes and ears.
Okay. And finally, Article 441-11. This allows the Articles of Association, the company's own rulebook, to authorize the board to delegate more significant management powers to an executive committee, often known as a comité de direction. Now, that sounds like a much more substantial and powerful delegation than just daily management. What's the key difference in practical terms?
It is, significantly so. This is a more formal and powerful delegation than gestion journalière. It creates a collective executive body with broader, more strategic management powers. The key distinction often lies in the nature of the tasks. Gestion journalière typically handles the routine, albeit potentially large-scale, operations, whereas a comité de direction, if authorized, can be empowered for broader strategic execution, operating within the policy framework set by the board. These articles distinguish between delegating routine operational matters and more substantial management powers, and each carries different implications for board oversight and, crucially, for director liability.
Liability. That's the other side of this dynamic tension, isn't it? The legal framework, while empowering the board to delegate for operational efficiency. Simultaneously, through Article 441-9, holds directors solidairement responsibles, jointly and severally liable for damages resulting from violations of the 1915 law or the company's Articles of Association. So it's a real double-edged sword. Delegate for speed, but remain potentially on the hook for the outcome.
You've truly hit on the core paradox, yes, and the essential tightrope walk for any board. Delegation is not just practical. For a large, complex enterprise like Global Satellites S.A. post-merger, it's arguably the only practical way to manage. However, this delegation does not in any way absolve the board of its ultimate responsibility for meticulous supervision. In fact, a failure to properly frame, to meticulously document, and to effectively oversee a delegation can itself be considered a management fault under Article 441-9.
Wow. So if the CEO, to whom you've delegated, say, millions of euros worth of daily management authority, makes a catastrophic error, and the board didn't have a clear, documented oversight mechanism in place, the board members could still be personally liable. That's quite the incentive for precision.
Precisely. What's truly fascinating here, and often overlooked perhaps in the rush for efficiency, is that these delegation articles must be viewed not just as tools for speeding up operations. They are critical instruments of risk management. Delegation is not an abdication of responsibility. It is fundamentally a structured extension of it. The board is effectively saying, we trust you to execute within these clearly defined parameters, but we retain ultimate accountability. This is absolutely vital for Global Satellites S.A., given its sheer complexity, its newly integrated international structure, and that profound public interest dimension due to state ownership. The board must meticulously craft these delegations not just to protect the company from operational missteps, but also to protect themselves and their fellow directors from potential legal exposure. It's all about proactive governance, not reactive damage control.
Okay, so for a publicly listed entity like Global Satellites S.A., operating under this kind of scrutiny, informal or verbal delegations are simply, well, they're out of the question.
Completely inadequate, yes.
This isn't about handshakes and gentlemen's agreements. It requires a robust, multi-layered documentation structure that's absolutely essential. It's the very backbone of their governance, really, designed to weather any storm.
Indeed. The first and foremost document in this toolkit, the foundational pillar upon which all other delegations must rest, is the Articles of Association, or AOA. Think of this document as the company's constitution. It's supreme internal legal document, and therefore the highest internal source of authority. For any truly significant delegations, like creating an executive committee under Article 441-11, the power must originate directly in the AOA. You cannot just decide it in a board meeting and hope it sticks. It needs that explicit foundational authorization. It's the ultimate permission slip, if you like.
Right. So for Global Satellites S.A. in its current rapidly evolving post-merger context, what's the immediate priority action concerning the AOA? Why is it so profoundly crucial right now?
Well, for the new chief legal officer, the CLO, and the company secretary, a top priority action would be to lead an immediate comprehensive review and, if necessary, a formal amendment of the AOA. This is so critical post-merger because the legacy company's AOA, likely tailored for a smaller pre-merger entity, might now feel like, well, trying to run a marathon in concrete shoes. It just doesn't fit the new reality. It might not provide the necessary flexibility to accommodate the new enlarged group's desired governance structure or its much larger operational scale. For instance, if they want to establish a powerful integrated executive committee that has significant autonomy, the AOA must explicitly permit it. Relying on default legal provisions is simply insufficient, potentially even risky for a company of this complexity and scale. It's really about ensuring the foundational document actively supports, rather than hinders, the operational reality of the combined entity.
Makes sense. Okay, so once that bedrock of the AOA is solidified, the next critical layer involves crafting effective board resolutions. Now, these aren't just meeting notes, are they? They are formal legal instruments, effectively the laws of the company. And I imagine vague wording here is just a direct path to internal disputes and ultimately that director liability we keep mentioning.
Absolutely. Vague wording is, quite frankly, a recipe for disaster. It is a direct path to future disputes, to operational paralysis because of uncertainty, and, as you rightly point out, potential director liability. An effective resolution that delegates power must be precise, utterly unambiguous. It needs to specify with crystal clarity. First, the delegate. Who exactly is receiving this power? Is it the CEO as an individual or an entire executive committee as a collective body?
Okay, the who. And I assume the exact scope of the power is equally critical to avoid any gray areas.
Precisely. Second, it must detail the exact scope of the delegated powers. This needs to include clear, specific financial limits for expenditures, for investments, and for contractual commitments. Think of it as painting a very clear line in the sand. Everyone needs to know exactly where that line is. Third, the duration of the delegation needs to be defined. Is it ongoing? Is it for a specific project? Does it have a set review date? And fourth, crucially, the specific reporting obligations from the delegate back to the board must be clearly outlined. The board needs to know precisely what information it will receive in what format and how frequently to maintain adequate oversight. And don't forget the minutes of the meeting themselves. They are vital. They must meticulously record the deliberations leading to the decision, providing context and irrefutable evidence of the board's due consideration and diligence. This paper trail is invaluable later on.
Right, the paper trail. So if the AOA is the Constitution and a board resolution is the law, then charters and terms of reference, or TOR, are maybe like the implementing regulations. They translate those high-level delegations into a detailed operational rulebook. I understand the company secretary typically develops and manages these documents.
That's a perfect analogy. Yes, charters are generally used for permanent bodies. Think about Global Satellites, S.A.'s Audit and Risk Committee, their Nomination Committee, and the Remuneration Committee. These documents define the committee's specific purpose, its composition, its precise responsibilities, its procedures for meetings, and its reporting lines back to the board. They are the fixed guideposts for how these standing committees operate, ensuring consistency and predictability.
Okay, those are charters for permanent committees. And terms of reference, are they typically used for more transient things or individual delegations, perhaps something more dynamic?
Exactly. Terms of reference, or TOR, are often used for individuals like the CEO, specifying their individual powers and limitations. Or they might be used for ad hoc committees formed for a specific time-limited purpose, like, for instance, a post-merger integration committee, which might be absolutely vital for Global Satellites S.A. right now. For Global Satellites, the TOR for the new CEO and the charter for a potential integration committee would be cornerstone documents. They wouldn't just be administrative pieces of paper. They would be foundational in establishing the new governance order, ensuring unified operations, and clarifying authority across the newly expanded global group.
Now, for a large listed company like this, operating across multiple jurisdictions, best practice isn't just having these individual documents scattered around, is it? It's about consolidating all levels of delegation into a single, board-approved delegation of authority, or DUE policy. This sounds like the ultimate single source of truth for who can do what within the company.
It absolutely is, or at least it should aim to be. This document, often presented in a clear, perhaps intuitive matrix format, creates an accessible and unambiguous hierarchy of authority throughout the entire organization. It specifies, often with painstaking detail, who can approve what. For instance, capital expenditures, entering into significant contracts, initiating new projects, or even specific hiring decisions, at which level, right from the CEO down to maybe mid-level operational managers. It's the ultimate internal control document.
What are the main tangible benefits of having such a comprehensive DUE policy? Beyond just, legal compliance, it seems like it would streamline a lot of day-to-day processes, wouldn't it?
Oh, immensely. First, it provides clarity for every single employee, removing guesswork or ambiguity about who has the authority to sign off on specific actions. This can dramatically speed up decision-making and reduce internal friction. Crucially, it significantly strengthens internal controls by setting clear boundaries and accountability at every level. And importantly, it offers a transparent, auditable trail for both internal and external auditors to follow, demonstrating robust, good governance practices. The company secretary typically serves as the primary custodian of this critical document. They're responsible for its regular review and updates to ensure it remains current, effective, and perfectly aligned with the company's evolving operational needs and strategic direction. It's an ongoing process, not a one-off task.
So this entire body of documentation, the AOA, the precise board resolutions, the detailed charters, and this comprehensive DUE policy, it's more than just paperwork then, isn't it? It's really the board's shield, its primary defense if things go wrong.
It is, emphatically, the tangible evidence that the board has diligently fulfilled its fundamental duty of organization and supervision. Remember Article 441-9? Directors can be held liable for mismanagement. A director's primary defense against such a claim, particularly if a delegated action goes awry, is demonstrating they acted as a bon père de famille.
Un père de famille, the good father of the family, the prudent person standard.
Exactly, a prudent and diligent person who took reasonable steps. In a large, complex organization like Global Satellites S.A., where direct, granular supervision of every single action by every employee is simply impossible, the board's prudent and diligent action is precisely to establish and then meticulously maintain a clear, robust, and well-documented system of delegation and oversight. In the unfortunate event of a crisis, a regulatory inquiry, or maybe a legal challenge, this comprehensive documentation becomes the board's primary shield. It provides verifiable proof of their responsible governance practices and the structured environment they established. It's really an investment in protection.
Okay, so the 1915 law provides the sophisticated spectrum of delegation mechanisms, each suited to different purposes, different levels of authority. Selecting the right tool isn't just a legal exercise, it's a key strategic decision for the board. And it's where theory meets the often messy reality of a large, international, and newly merged corporation like Global Satellites S.A. Let's look at the practical implications, starting with that delegation of daily management, the gestion journalière.
Indeed. Article 441-10 of the 1915 law allows the board to delegate gestion journalière to the CEO or other key managers. Now, the term gestion journalière is notoriously fluid, and crucially, it's not actually defined in the law itself. Its interpretation depends heavily on the company's specific context, its size, its business, its industry, even its risk profile. What might it mean for a multi-billion euro entity like Global Satellites S.A. compared to, say, a small local enterprise? The scale of operations, the nature of decisions, the potential impact, they're vastly different.
Right. So in a small company, gestion journalière might genuinely mean signing low-value checks or approving small routine purchases. But for Global Satellites S.A., a global satellite communications provider with huge contracts and billion-euro budgets, what does that translate to? And maybe just as importantly, what is almost universally excluded from this concept, regardless of the company's scale?
You've hit on the core ambiguity. For Global Satellites S.A., gestion journalière could easily encompass transactions worth many millions of euros. It could involve significant operational decisions about satellite launches or network upgrades, or even signing multi-year service agreements with major clients. However, Luxembourg jurisprudence, and frankly, prudent practice, generally delineate gestion journalière as relating to routine, day-to-day operational decisions. Decisions that do not fundamentally alter the company's strategic direction, its capital structure, its core business object, or its fundamental risk profile. So a multi-million euro service contract. If it's within their normal course of business and within an approved budget, that might well fall under daily management. But initiating a new M&A process, securing a transformative new financing facility, fundamentally changing the company's articles of association, even if those are daily tasks for a busy CEO in terms of their focus, they would almost certainly step over that line into board territory regardless of scale. The critical task for the board, therefore, is to explicitly and meticulously define what this concept means for their specific company, detailing it clearly within the CEO's terms of reference. No ambiguity allowed.
And this becomes particularly acute, you mentioned, given the international background of the new CEO at Global Satellites S.A., an executive with, say, a U.S. or U.K. background. They're likely to expect a broader scope of implied authority under what's known as the business judgment rule, common in those common law jurisdictions. This sounds like a crucial and potentially quite delicate point of negotiation when they're appointed, almost a clash of legal philosophies playing out.
It absolutely is. Common law jurisdictions often rely more on broad principles and afford significant discretion to executives, assuming they'll act in the company's best interest unless proven otherwise. There's a degree of trust baked in. In contrast, civil law jurisdictions like Luxembourg place a much greater emphasis on codified law, on specific, explicit authorizations, and formally documented powers for pretty much every significant action. So picture this. A U.S. director might broadly trust the CEO to execute strategy, focusing mainly on the outcomes, while a Luxembourgish director will be looking for the specific board resolution or the AOA clause, explicitly authorizing that significant action, prioritizing the process and the documented authority.
That's a fundamental clash of expectations, isn't it? One is asking what was the intention, while the other is asking where is the specific written authority. How do you bridge that gap in a practical, real-world board setting?
It is a clash, yes, and it can create substantial friction. It can lead to frustrating delays, constant requests for clarification, even internal accusations of overreach from one side or micromanagement from the other. A U.S. executive might forge ahead with a significant new initiative, genuinely believing they have the implied authority to do so based on their experience back home, while their Luxembourgish board colleague might interpret this as a completely unauthorized act. The only truly effective way to bridge this cultural and legal gap is through that explicit, detailed, and meticulously written delegation framework, the comprehensive DUE policy we discussed earlier. This policy becomes the single source of truth, the common language for all directors and executives, regardless of their background or prior experience. In this context, the DUE policy isn't just a control document. It is a critical communication tool, a sort of Rosetta Stone, for aligning the expectations of a diverse international board and executive team. It allows everyone to operate from the same playbook, minimizing those costly misunderstandings.
So clarity isn't just about avoiding legal trouble. It's about fostering a functional, trust-based working relationship across cultures.
Okay, moving on. What about delegating to an executive committee, a comité de direction, under Article 441-11? This seems like a more formal, more powerful setup, designed maybe for a collective leadership effort.
It is indeed. This mechanism is a more powerful and formal tool for delegation, and it carries a crucial prerequisite. It must be authorized by the Articles of Association. That requirement itself signifies its higher status and more strategic role compared to just gestion journalière. Its scope allows the board to delegate a broader range of management powers, excluding, of course, the company's overall general policy and matters specifically reserved to the board by law to a collective body. Think of it as empowering a council of executive leaders rather than just one individual CEO. So it's a team, not an individual, getting these broader powers. For Global Satellites S.A., with its recent massive merger, how could establishing a formal comité de direction be a particularly potent instrument for integration? For bringing together the two previously separate entities?
Oh, it could be incredibly potent, almost an accelerant for integration, you could say. By forming a formal comité de direction, comprising members of both the legacy leadership teams from the merged entities, the board would effectively compel them to operate as a single, unified body with a shared mandate. This collective responsibility, operating under the direct supervision of the board, helps to break down those old organizational silos. It fosters a unified corporate culture and ensures that the newly combined executive team acts with a clear collective purpose. It helps prevent that old us versus them mentality from lingering, which can be so damaging post-merger. However, a key governance challenge here, and one the board must actively manage, is ensuring clear reporting lines and avoiding the inadvertent creation of a shadow board, a committee that either informally or even unintentionally starts to usurp the full board's ultimate authority. The line between executive execution and board oversight must remain distinct.
Right, avoiding the shadow board. Okay, and finally, we have delegation to board committees under Article 441-6. Global Satellites S.A. already has established audit and risk nomination and remuneration committees. What's their primary role, and how do their delegated powers differ fundamentally from the executive delegations we've just discussed? They're not running the company day to day, are they?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental and crucial distinction. These committees do not exercise executive management powers. Their delegated authority is primarily for preparation, for in-depth analysis, and for meticulous oversight on behalf of the full board. Think of them as the board's specialized eyes and ears, or perhaps its internal think tanks, as you suggested earlier. They conduct deep dives into specific critical areas, like scrutinizing the company's financial reporting and internal controls, assessing its complex risk management frameworks, or developing executive compensation structures that align with strategy. They then make detailed recommendations and present their findings, their analysis, for the full board to review, deliberate upon, and ultimately approve or reject.
So they don't make the executive decisions themselves, but they do a lot of the heavy lifting in preparing for those decisions and then diligently monitoring their execution afterwards. They're like the board's highly specialized research and verification arm.
Exactly. Their charters must clearly delineate this advisory and preparatory role to avoid any confusion or overlap with executive decision-making authority. The key governance challenge for these committees is precisely maintaining that advisory and oversight role and preventing them from subtly straying into executive territory, which can happen if roles aren't clearly defined and policed. Their immense value lies in their ability to provide the full board with thoroughly analyzed information, well-vetted recommendations, and expert insights. This allows the board to make more informed, more strategic, and ultimately more effective decisions. They really elevate the quality of board-level discussions. Now, the theoretical framework of delegation, while robust under the 1915 law, must always be applied within the unique and often quite unpredictable context of a given company. For Global Satellites S.A., where you have this recent post-merger integration, its diverse international leadership, and the critical presence of a state shareholder all converging, well, it creates specific and significant pressures. This is truly where the subtleties, and frankly the potential pitfalls, come into sharp focus.
Let's unpack the post-merger integration challenge first. After acquiring its U.S.-based competitor, you mentioned the immediate task is to conduct what's often called governance due diligence on the acquired entity's existing delegation practices. What exactly does that entail in practice, and why is it so critically important to get right quickly?
Well, it's about a deep dive into the acquired company's existing governance landscape. How do they do things? The two legacy companies, the original Global Satellites S.A. and the new U.S. entity, will inevitably have very different delegation of authority policies, different approval thresholds for expenditures, different reporting lines, and probably quite distinct corporate cultures regarding internal decision-making. For instance, the U.S. entity might have had much looser principle-based delegations, perhaps relying more on individual manager discretion, while Global Satellites S.A. might have had more granular, rule-based, highly formalized ones. So, a key and often quite painstaking project for the CLO and the company secretary is to lead the complex process of harmonizing these disparate frameworks, creating a single, coherent system for the new combined entity. This requires careful negotiation, a great deal of sensitivity to establish practices in both organizations you can't just impose one way overnight, and, critically, a clear, unwavering mandate from the board to create a unified governance standard across the entire group. It's as much a cultural integration project as it is a legal or procedural one. Without this harmonization, you risk ongoing internal confusion, decision-making delays, and a fragmented process that actually undermines the very benefits the merger was supposed to achieve.
Speaking of culture, the international board and executive team at Global Satellites S.A., with their blend of Luxembourgish, German, Dutch, U.S., and U.K. nationals, you said it sounds like a potential minefield for cultural misunderstandings regarding governance. How do these differences in legal and corporate philosophy actually manifest in the boardroom or maybe in day-to-day operations? What does it look like?
Oh, it absolutely introduces a significant risk of misinterpretation. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's quite glaring. As we touched on, corporate governance norms in common law jurisdictions, like the U.S. and U.K., often rely more on broad principles, a sense of fair play, and afford significant discretion to executives based on that business judgment rule. The underlying assumption is often that management acts in good faith within broad parameters. In contrast, civil law jurisdictions like Luxembourg place a much greater emphasis on codified law, on specific, explicit authorizations, and formally documented powers for pretty much every significant action. So you can easily picture this. A U.S. director might broadly trust the CEO to execute the agreed strategy, focusing primarily on the outcomes, the results. While a Luxembourg's director, perhaps more focused on process and legal certainty, will be looking for the specific board resolution or the Articles of Association clause explicitly authorizing that significant action. They want to see the documented authority first.
That's a fundamental clash of expectations, isn't it? One perspective is asking, what was the strategic intention and are we achieving it? While the other is asking, where is the specific written authority allowing this action? How do you bridge that gap in a practical, real-world board setting? It sounds tricky.
It is tricky, and it can create substantial friction if not managed proactively. It can lead to frustrating delays because people are constantly seeking clarification based on their own assumptions. It can even lead to internal accusations, one side feeling the other is overreaching, the other side feeling they're being micromanaged. A U.S. executive, for example, might forge ahead with a significant new initiative, genuinely believing they have the implied authority to do so based on their experience back home, while their Luxembourgish board colleague might view this as a completely unauthorized act, a breach of process. The only truly effective way to bridge this cultural and legal gap is through that explicit, detailed, and meticulously written delegation framework, that comprehensive DUA policy we discussed earlier. This policy becomes the single source of truth, the common language, the shared playbook for all directors and executives, regardless of their background or prior experience. In this context, the DUA policy isn't merely a control document, it's a critical communication tool. It's like a Rosetta Stone for aligning the expectations of a diverse international board and executive team. It allows everyone to operate from the same page, minimizing those costly misunderstandings and building trust based on shared rules.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then we have the third specific nuance, partial state ownership. Having a Luxembourg government representative serving as vice chairperson of the board, how does this particular element fundamentally alter the governance dynamic and, I suppose, heighten the scrutiny on delegation?
The presence of a state shareholder fundamentally alters the governance dynamic, yes. It shifts it beyond purely private commercial considerations. The state isn't just another important shareholder with financial interests. It represents the broader public interest. This means that decisions on delegation, and indeed all significant corporate actions, are no longer purely internal business matters. They immediately acquire a profound public accountability dimension. The board must be able to demonstrate not just to its state shareholder, but by extension to the wider public, that a robust, transparent, and auditable system for delegating power is not only meticulously in place, but also that this power is being exercised responsibly, with integrity, and arguably in the public's best interest, alongside the company's commercial interests.
So there's far less room for casual arrangements, perhaps unwritten understandings, or just trust us scenarios compared to a purely private company. Every I must be dotted, every T crossed, perhaps even more rigorously.
Precisely. This elevates the importance of every formal aspect of governance. Meticulously detailed meeting minutes become even more critical. Demanding clear and regular reporting from delegates back to the board is essential. Requiring rigorous, verifiable oversight by the board and its specialized committees is non-negotiable. There is far less room for informal arrangements or unwritten understandings in such a scenario. Any action, or indeed any perceived lapse in process or oversight, could potentially be subject to public scrutiny, political questioning, or media inquiry. It simply demands a heightened level of formality, absolute transparency, and verifiable diligence in every single aspect of governance. This public trust component adds another significant layer of complexity and responsibility that Global Satellites S.A.'s board must navigate with utmost care and demonstrable prudence.
Right. So delegation, as we've thoroughly established, is a vital tool for management. It enables efficiency, particularly in complex organizations. But it is emphatically not an escape from responsibility. The board always retains ultimate authority and, crucially, ultimate accountability for the company's overall direction and performance. No matter how much authority they've formally delegated downwards, it's the ultimate burden of leadership, really.
That's the golden rule, yes. The foundational principle that underpins all good corporate governance. Despite the broad possibilities for delegation under the 1915 law, certain duties are absolutely fundamental to the board's role, and they simply cannot, under any circumstances, be delegated. These form the inalienable core of their responsibilities. You could call it the strategic red line that cannot be crossed.
Okay, so what are some of those critical non-delegable duties? The things the board must always keep for itself, no matter how large or complex the organization becomes.
Well, first and foremost, the board is solely responsible for setting the company's overall strategy, its general policy direction, and its fundamental risk appetite. These are the highest level directional decisions that define the company's entire path and, in many ways, its corporate DNA. Second, they must meticulously review and formally approve the annual and consolidated accounts before they're submitted to the shareholders. This is a critical financial stewardship and fiduciary duty, a direct sign-off on the company's reported financial health. Third, the board retains the absolute power to convene the annual general meeting of shareholders and, importantly, to propose key resolutions to that meeting. Things like the distribution of dividends or the crucial discharge, of directors from their responsibilities for the past financial year.
Okay, so anything that touches the core strategic direction, the fundamental legal structure, or the ultimate financial accountability of the company, that stays firmly with the board. They can delegate the doing of many things, but not the being ultimately responsible for these core functions.
Exactly. Fourth, they are solely responsible for proposing to the shareholders any decisions that require amendment to the Articles of Association. Think about major structural changes like mergers, the dissolution of the company, or significant capital modifications. These are existential decisions for the company. And overarching all of this, perhaps the most crucial non-delegable duty is the board's ultimate and inescapable duty of supervision over all delegated bodies and individuals. They can delegate the execution of tasks, but they can never, ever delegate the oversight responsibility. It's a fundamental tenet of Luxembourg corporate law.
That brings us squarely to the mechanisms of effective oversight, because, as the saying goes, delegation without oversight is abdication. It's not about micromanagement, which everyone agrees can stifle executive initiative. It's about establishing a structured, efficient process of verification and accountability. What are the key practical tools for achieving that for a company like Luxembourg S.A. with all its complexities?
Well, the first and perhaps most critical tool is structured reporting. The board must mandate regular, standardized, and importantly, focused reports from the CEO and all committees. These reports shouldn't just be lengthy narratives or data dumps. They must focus on pre-agreed key performance indicators, KPIs, clearly identified risk exposures, any significant exceptions to agreed-upon plans or budget limits, and tangible progress on strategic initiatives. This ensures the board receives relevant, concise, and actionable information, allowing them to spot trends, identify potential problems, or verify progress quickly. It's really about getting the crucial signal, not just drowning in the noise.
Right, focused reporting. And beyond those formal reports, what about ensuring the board has access to information more generally? Perhaps even, dare I say, unfiltered information sometimes?
That's crucial too. The board needs to ensure it has pathways for direct and, where appropriate, unfiltered access to information. This is often facilitated by the company secretary, who acts as the central hub for corporate information and can provide an independent overview. And also, very importantly, this access comes through the internal audit function. Internal audit should ideally have a direct reporting line, a dotted line at least, to the Audit and Risk Committee. This provides an independent check and balance, allowing the board to get a perspective that isn't solely curated by the executive team they have delegated power to.
Okay. And finally, the board must retain the absolute right to step back in and take control if necessary, to override a delegated decision, perhaps. It's the ultimate safety net, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is known as the right of evocation. The board must always retain the explicit right to revoke a delegation entirely, or to take back a specific decision for its own deliberation, even if it has previously delegated that type of decision to an executive or a committee. This right should be explicitly stated in all delegation documents, the terms of reference, the committee charters, just to remove any ambiguity. It's the ultimate safety valve. It allows the board to intervene directly if a delegated action significantly deviates from strategy, becomes unexpectedly risky, or simply goes off track for some reason. It's about ensuring ultimate control, not just relying on the illusion of it.
All of this, then, ties back directly to director liability under Article 441-9. This, in many ways, is the ultimate backstop for good governance, isn't it? The personal stakes for directors are incredibly high if things go wrong.
It truly is the ultimate incentive for robust governance practices. Under Article 441-9 of the 1915 law, directors are held jointly and severally liable, solidarment responsibles to the company, and in certain specific circumstances, even to third parties for management faults, faute de gestion, and for violations of the law or the company's articles of association. Now, a properly structured and meticulously documented delegation framework can serve to significantly reduce this liability risk. How? By demonstrating that the board acted prudently, that they appointed qualified individuals and committees to handle specific tasks, and crucially, that they established clear and effective oversight mechanisms. It shows due diligence.
But I imagine there's a catch. Simply ticking the box and delegating isn't enough to absolve a director of responsibility, is it? You can't just delegate, close your eyes, and hope for the best.
No, not at all. That's the critical nuance. Blind delegation, or a manifest failure to supervise, known in legal terms as a défaut de surveillance, is itself considered a management fault. This is critical. If a delegate's actions cause harm to the company, and the board cannot demonstrate that it had a reasonable and effective oversight system in place, the individual directors can potentially be held liable for the consequences of the delegate's actions, even though they didn't perform the action themselves. It's a powerful incentive for continuous active engagement and demonstrable diligence from the board. It's not necessarily about finding fault after the fact, but about showing you have the right preventative systems in place all along.
So if a director disagrees with a delegation decision being made by the board, or perhaps becomes aware later of a delegate's misconduct and believes it's not being adequately addressed, what should they do to protect themselves from that joint liability? There's a formal step, isn't there?
That's where formal dissent becomes absolutely crucial for individual director protection. A director who disagrees with a specific delegation decision, or who becomes aware of a delegate's misconduct or poor performance and believes the board's current oversight or response is inadequate. They must ensure their dissent, their opposing view, and the reasons for it are formally recorded in the minutes of the relevant board meeting. This provides a clear, verifiable record. It forms the basis for disclaiming joint liability if things ultimately go wrong down the line. It's not necessarily about being confrontational, but about prudent self-protection and, frankly, fulfilling one's individual fiduciary duty. The key principle for directors, which cannot be stressed enough, is that one can delegate authority, but one can never, ever delegate ultimate responsibility. That burden always rests squarely with the board as a collective and potentially with its members individually. So, to wrap up, the effective delegation of powers in a large listed Luxembourg S.A. is undoubtedly a complex process. It's filled with legal nuances, cultural sensitivities, as we've seen, but it is entirely manageable with the right structured approach. For a company like Global Satellites S.A., navigating those unique pressures of its post-merger integration, its incredibly diverse international leadership team, and the critical presence of a state shareholder, well, it requires a governance framework that is not only legally compliant, but I would argue exceptionally clear, robust, and transparent in every single aspect.
Right. And the core principles, as we've discussed today, are firmly grounded in that 1915 law. The board holds plenary power, which it can strategically delegate through specific legal mechanisms like gestion journalier or committees. But it retains ultimate responsibility and liability, which it must discharge through diligent, structured oversight. The key to success, as we've repeatedly seen throughout this deep dive, really lies in meticulous, unambiguous documentation. Documentation that transforms abstract legal principles into practical, operational realities, safeguarding both the company's future and, frankly, the director's peace of mind. So for you, the corporate governance professional listening to this, maybe a CLO, company secretary, director, or advisor here, is an actionable checklist, a strategic blueprint, if you will, to take away from this deep dive, something concrete to consider and perhaps implement in your own organizations. First, audit the Articles of Association. And this isn't a passive review. You need to proactively confirm that the company's fundamental legal document provides the necessary flexibility for the desired delegation structure. Particularly if you're contemplating authorizing a powerful executive committee, a comité de direction, if the AOA doesn't provide that flexibility. A formal amendment should be proposed to the board as an absolute priority. Ignoring this foundational step is like, well, building a skyscraper on quicksand, it just won't hold up under pressure.
Second, develop a comprehensive master delegation of authority, or DUA, policy. Take the lead in creating a single, all-encompassing document, one that clearly outlines all financial and operational approval thresholds for the entire entity, especially crucial after a merger. Securing full board approval for this cornerstone policy is non-negotiable. It's the bedrock of your operational governance and becomes a single source of truth for authority throughout the organization. This will save countless hours of internal debate and, more importantly perhaps, prevent a lot of sleepless nights for directors down the road.
Third, draft explicit terms of reference and charters. For the CEO, for any executive committee, and for all board committees, detailed, crystal clear documents must be crafted. These should precisely define their scope, their powers, any specific limitations on those powers, and their specific reporting duties back to the board. Leave absolutely no room for ambiguity here. Precision is paramount. Vagueness is the enemy.
Fourth, standardize board resolutions. Establish and rigorously enforce templates for all resolutions that delegate power. This ensures they are consistently legally robust, unambiguous in their wording, and uniform in their application across all types of delegations. This methodical approach ensures legal certainty and builds confidence in the process.
Fifth, design a robust, proactive oversight framework. Work closely in collaboration with the Chief Financial Officer and the Head of Internal Audit to define the precise reporting package the board will regularly receive from all delegates. This isn't just about dumping data on the board. It's about designing a package that enables them to effectively monitor performance, ensure compliance, identify emerging risk exposures, and proactively manage potential deviations from strategic plans. It's about getting the critical information presented clearly, not just all the information.
Sixth, educate the board. Don't assume everyone understands the nuances, especially in an international context. Conduct a formal, comprehensive training session with the full board. This is particularly important for new members who have joined perhaps from an acquired company or from different legal jurisdictions. This session should thoroughly explain the Luxembourg legal framework for delegation and, crucially, their non-delegable duties of supervision under Article 441-9. Knowledge is not just power. In this specific context, it is also paramount protection against liability.
And finally, and perhaps most subtly challenging, manage those cultural dynamics. Actively facilitate open, honest discussions between your international board members and the new executive team specifically to align expectations on governance practices. It is vital to acknowledge and address cultural differences in governance styles head-on in a transparent and constructive manner. The goal is to build a common understanding and ultimately a truly unified corporate culture that values both operational agility and meticulous compliance. This isn't a nice-to-have. For any global entity like Luxembourg S.A, it's a critical success factor.
Absolutely. This meticulous, multi-layered approach to delegation is not just about compliance with the letter of the law, although that's essential. It's really about building a resilient and incredibly effective governance structure, one that can confidently withstand the inherent pressures of a dynamic global business environment. It's about ensuring the board can confidently delegate, empowering their executive team to drive the business forward effectively, all while knowing that the ultimate responsibility for the company's success, its ongoing integrity, and its hardened reputation remains firmly and demonstrably in their capable hands. This allows them ultimately to focus on true strategic leadership, where their value is greatest.
This podcast is a collaborative and free resource that improves continually, so your comments or requests for new topics are highly welcome, especially on YouTube. We want to be a helpful strength for everyone working in the Luxembourg Financial Center at all levels. We are often asked how you can help us. Well, a great way to help is by subscribing to our shows on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, as well as on Apple Podcasts, where a 5-star rating would really help us. You can also like our videos and subscribe to our Rigor Media YouTube channel. All relevant links will be available in the show notes. For our French-speaking listeners, you can also find our sister podcast in French. It was the Luxembourg Fundcast for you today. This podcast includes content created using artificial intelligence tools. All information is for general purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or regulatory advice. Listeners should verify information independently and consult qualified professionals for personalized guidance.